Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. Bai Xiaochun's voice quavered as he spoke, and even as it rang out, he suddenly darted away as surely as a rabbit whose tail had been stepped on. The speed with which he moved left everyone stunned. Never could anyone present have imagined that Bai Xiaochun would flee like this in the face of this black-robed, shadowy figure. Even the black-robed figure seemed stunned. He actually hadn't intended to frighten Bai Xiaochun, he just naturally had a grim and sinister way of speaking, the type that normally was filled with perilous killing intent. In fact, he wasn't even aware that it was the killing intent in his voice that had prompted Bai Xiaochun to flee the way he had. The moment Bai Xiaochun scurried away, Chen Haosong's eyes flashed, and he took a step forward to give chase. As for Mistress Red Dust, her expression flickered, and she lunged to block Chen Haosong's path. The 9 heavenly marquises all flew into the air, shouting loudly. How dare you flee, Bai Hao? If the Grand Heaven Master wants you dead, then there's nowhere in heaven and earth that you could flee to. Even the chosen whose life force had been drained all got very excited, and even began to laugh uproariously. As far as Zhou Hong was concerned, the heavens did have eyes, and it was with profound satisfaction that he looked at the fleeing Bai Xiaochun. You will be killed beyond the shadow of a doubt, Bai Hao. As the scene devolved into chaos, the black-robed figure suddenly burst into motion, piercing through the air to pass Chen Haosong, and then appear right in front of Bai Xiaochun. What are you doing, Bai Hao? He said in an angry voice. Bai Xiaochun was on the verge of tears. By this point, it was obvious that this black-robed figure was a diva. Damn it, how come there are so many devas all of a sudden? Eyes bloodshot from terror at the deadly crisis, Bai Xiaochun let out a shout and drew upon the speed of his fleshly body to rocket off in a different direction. At this point, the black-robed figure realized that he had scared Bai Xiaochun out of his wits. Unsure of whether to laugh or cry, he simply stood where he was and spoke in a gravelly voice. Hear the decree of the Grand Heaven Master. Bai Hao is hereby appointed as the Inspections Commissioner of Arch-Emperor City, and is given command of 1,000 troops. This was the most quickly and efficiently he had ever delivered a dharmic decree in his entire life. Usually, he took his time, and spoke in a sinister fashion that put pressure on everyone who heard his words. But now, it was with a bitter smile that he spit the words out as quickly as possible. Immediately, everything went completely quiet. The heavenly marquises who had been chasing Bai Xiaochun turned with wide eyes toward the black-robed figure, unsure if they had misheard. Inspections, Commissioner? Chen Haosong had been blocked by Mistress Red Dust, but was just preparing to continue chasing Bai Xiaochun, when he heard the words and instantly stopped in place, turning to look at the black-robed figure with an expression of complete incredulity. The other heavenly duke was equally stunned. Mistress Red Dust's eyes went wide at the sheer outrageousness of it all. Her original guess had been that if the Grand Heaven Master wanted to give some face to the Giant Ghost King, then he would order Bai Hao to return to Giant Ghost City. Never had she even considered the possibility that he would promote him to be the Inspections Commissioner. The Inspections Commissioner in the city was no small figure. He had the right to perform inspections on all the important people in the city, and was actually extremely powerful. Back when the Grand Heaven Master had been in the middle of his rise to power, he had appointed an Inspections Commissioner who held that position for 100 years. That Inspections Commissioner had presided over a reign of terror, and had slaughtered countless political rivals of the Grand Heaven Master. He had struck fear into the hearts of everyone in the aristocracy, fear that lingered to this day. After the Grand Heaven Master consolidated his power, he removed the Inspections Commissioner from office and instead had him serve as a personal High Counselor. And that man was none other than this black-robed shadowy figure. The position of Inspections Commissioner had been empty ever since he left it, but now, Bai Xiaochun had been promoted. The powerful experts who had come from the various clans, as well as the bedraggled chosen down on the ground, were all completely stunned, their expressions frozen, at least until they began to cry out in alarm. How is this even possible? Inspections Commissioner, in command of 1,000 troops. Bai Xiaochun was still fleeing at top speed, but when he heard the words that had just been spoken, he slowed down to a stop, his eyes wide. Never in his wildest imagination could he have guessed that, not only would he come out of the situation unscathed, but he would also get a promotion. At this point, he still hadn't turned around, and actually wasn't convinced of what was really happening. However, considering that nobody was chasing him anymore, he turned to look at the black-robed figure. When he found that the black-robed figure was staring back at him, he hesitated for a moment, then pointed at himself and asked, "I'm the inspections commissioner?" The black-robed figure was looking at Bai Xiaochun, feeling a bit of a headache coming on as he wondered whether or not the Grand Heaven Master might have issued the wrong dharmic decree. How could this fellow be the inspections commissioner, who was supposed to strike fear and dread into the heart of the aristocracy? And yet, he didn't dare to go against the Grand Heaven Master, and was forced to simply sigh and nod his head. Not sounding polite at all, he said, "If you're Bai Hao, then you're the one. However, I really do want to know why you're running away." Feeling guilty about something? Bai Xiaochun blinked a few times. Although he was now certain of what was happening, it almost seemed like a dream. He quickly pulled himself together, though. Taking a deep breath, he swished his sleeve, stuck his chin up, and proudly said, "Ha ha ha. Ahem, of course I know how important I am to the Grand Heaven Master. My goal moments ago was to see who present would dare to violate the dharmic decree of the Grand Heaven Master and attempt to kill me anyway." As of this moment, not a trace of the fear from moments ago could be seen on Bai Xiaochun. He seemed righteous, and even stern as he stood there tall and straight. I will most certainly remember how everyone acted moments ago. With that, his gaze slowly slid across the crowd. Then he looked over at Zhou Hong and the other chosen down on the ground. Looking very stern and just, he said, "And don't think I didn't notice how excited all of you were acting just now." Then he looked at Mistress Red Dust, assuming the posture of an important figure, which was something he was very proficient at doing. "As for you, Zemo, please accept my thanks for your assistance today. I clearly misjudged you. You truly are a lovely woman." The truth was that he really did appreciate what Mistress Red Dust had done. An unsightly expression appeared on Mistress Red Dust's face when Bai Xiaochun called her a lovely woman, and she couldn't refrain from gritting her teeth and letting out a cold snort. The sudden turn of events had Chen Haosong looking very ill at ease. The 9 heavenly marquises also seemed very apprehensive. As for Zhou Hong and the other chosen, they were cursing Bai Xiaochun inwardly for how shameless he was. He had clearly been fleeing like a frightened rabbit moments before, but now that he was the inspections commissioner, he immediately pretended that he was on the side of justice. The black-robed figure seemed to understand Bai Xiaochun a bit better by this point. Although he was still a bit annoyed, he ignored Bai Xiaochun's little speech and coolly said, "Very well, come with me to see the Grand Heaven Master." Then he turned to leave, clearly not in the mood to stay in Burrow 89 any longer. The mishaps of the day were simply too preposterous. Now that disaster had been averted, Bai Xiaochun was finally starting to calm down. As it turned out, there really hadn't been a reason to be so flustered to have all of these devas chasing him. "I can't believe I'm the inspections commissioner," he thought. Although it seemed like his veins of steel were pulsing, he was still feeling very jumpy. Even his stomach felt a bit upset. However, he simply turned and swaggered after the black-robed figure, who took him flying toward the imperial palace. Everyone else who was left behind at first just stood there, either dazed or depressed. Then, having no options left, they simply left, taking their chosen with them back to their clans. At long last, Burrow 89 was quiet again. Zhou Hong was helped away, and despite his weak state, immediately went back to 9 Serenities City. He had no desire at all to remain behind in Archemperor City, and was terrified by the mere thought that, not only had he failed to kill Bai Hao, but Bai Hao had also been promoted to inspections commissioner. On 2 occasions, Bai Xiaochun had drained Zhou Hong of life force with absolutely no consequences. In fact, he had actually become famous, and even increased his overall standing as a result. And now, he had caught the attention of the Grand Heaven Master, and had been given the matchlessly terrifying title of Inspections Commissioner. Zhou Hong wasn't the only one to be terrified by the situation. Virtually all of the aristocratic chosen were the same. Even their clans as a whole were shaken. A person who had once been a nameless nobody was instantly the focus of all attention, and someone that no one could afford to ignore. It was a sudden turn of events that many people had trouble accepting. Of course, news spread rapidly, and before long, the wily old foxes in the aristocracy began to put the puzzle pieces together, and come to an understanding of what the Grand Heaven Master was thinking. Something big is coming. It was hard to say who came to this conclusion first, but soon, everyone was talking about it. When the Spirit Advent King heard about the situation, he removed any restrictions on his daughter Shu Shan. As for the 9 Serenities King, after Zhou Hong returned, he treated his injuries and then gave strict orders that he wasn't to set foot out of 9 Serenities City. When the giant Ghost King heard the news, he sat there on his throne for a long moment, various expressions playing out on his face. In the end, he sighed. If the Grand Heaven Master wants him, can I really refuse? He shook his head, mixed emotions visible in his eyes. Mistress Red Dust returned to the giant ghost legion, wrapped up in her own thoughts and speculations about what it all meant. Because of one single order given by the Grand Heaven Master, the entire Arch-Emperor dynasty was now astir. In fact, somewhere deep in the imperial palace, in a majestic hall, a man sat on an imperial throne, clad in imperial robes. As soon as he heard the news, his hands clenched down onto the dragon-shaped arms of his throne, and his entire body went stiff. Meanwhile, Bai Xiaochun followed the black-robed figure through the imperial palace. He was no longer strutting, but rather, looking around vigilantly. Although he was pleased by how things were playing out, he was still fearful and anxious about this Grand Heaven Master. Although Bai Xiaochun couldn't make out the black-robed man's face, he could sense how stern and sinister he was. It put quite a bit of pressure onto Bai Xiaochun, and he was just thinking of saying something to ease the tension between the two of them when the man seemed to realize what he was thinking. From now until the moment we reach the Grand Heaven Master, keep your mouth shut. Bai Xiaochun was not very pleased at how impolite the response to his unspoken question had been. After all, he was now the inspections commissioner. However, considering that this person was a diva, and also had been sent personally by the Grand Heaven Master, it seemed like a good strategy to just give in to him now. However, there didn't appear to be any need to actually fear him. This shadowy bastard tried to screw me over earlier. Back when he delivered the Dharmic decree, he intentionally made it seem like he wanted to kill me. All to frighten me. That made Bai Xiaochun even madder, but he knew what to say and how to say it, and therefore kept his expression calm as he followed the black-robed man through the imperial palace. The palace was huge, and was as impressive as a celestial paradise, but Bai Xiaochun wasn't in the mood to enjoy it. He focused on trying to keep track of the path they were following, until eventually, they arrived at the entrance of a grand hall. It seemed ordinary, without any ornate decorations. It could even have been described as simple. There was something ancient about it, and in the main courtyard in front of the entrance, there was a cauldron with incense burning in it, the smoke spiraling high up into the sky. Not a single person was present, making it seem like the type of place few people would be willing to come to. Wait here. With that, the black-robed man proceeded forward a few steps before vanishing without a trace. Bai Xiaochun looked at the main door, which was closed, and then around at the silent courtyard. Finally, he stood there quietly waiting. For some reason, the huge hall seemed like an enormous beast staring down at him. Bai Xiaochun swallowed hard. It would be impossible not to be nervous in a moment like this. However, after mentally reviewing the situation, he still felt like he should be fine. After all, it wouldn't be difficult for the Grand Heaven Master to cause trouble for him if he wanted to. Considering they were in Arch-Emperor City, the man could have apprehended him at any time he wished. As he stood there waiting, he tried to decide how to carry himself in this meeting. It probably wouldn't be a good idea to resort to flattery. The giant ghost king likes that kind of thing, but I don't know enough about the Grand Heaven Master. What's the first thing he's going to do? Act awe-inspiring? Or maybe chide me? As he sat there stewing in anxious thoughts, he suddenly realized that something seemed off, as if someone were looking at him from above. Slowly looking up, he saw that high up in the clouds, an enormous head was hanging down, looking at him with a curious expression. It was a dragon. At the same time, intense pressure descended, pressure that Bai Xiaochun could tell surpassed Chen Haosong. Obviously, this dragon was comparable to a demigod. Bai Xiaochun had seen this very same dragon from afar when he had first arrived at Arch-Emperor City. But now, he was right in front of it, only about 300 meters away. He could see virtually every detail about it, including the sea of scales that covered its body. Although Bai Xiaochun was a bit alarmed to be so close to a dragon, he quickly put a smile onto his face, waved, and called out a greeting. Hi there. Almost immediately, the dragon's eyes glittered. Then, Bai Xiaochun sensed a wind blowing against his face, whereupon he discovered that the dragon had dropped its head down further, until it was only a bit more than a meter away from him. Bai Xiaochun gasped in shock, and began to tremble at having something so huge right in front of him. He could even feel its breath on him, which was when he realized the dragon was actually sniffing him curiously. At this point, he really felt like crying, and took a step back. As he did, the dragon moved forward. Scalp tingling, Bai Xiaochun kept the friendly smile on his face, and was about to say something else when the voice of an old man drifted out from inside the hall. He likes you. Bai Xiaochun turned to find that, at some unknown point, the door to the hall had opened, and visible in its depths was an old man. He wore a long white robe, and somehow seemed like a god or divine being. His gaze was the type that seemed to make everything else unimportant, as though a mere glance from him could make the darkest places bright. It was a sensation that caused Bai Xiaochun's heart to tremble. This man was definitely the same man who had been projected into the river-defying sect. Chen Manyao's master. In fact, even if he had never seen him before, Bai Xiaochun would have instantly been able to tell that this was the Grand Heaven Master. Without any hesitation, he clasped hands and bowed. Your humble servant Bai Hao offers greetings, Grand Heaven Master. Come in, the Grand Heaven Master said with a slight smile. He wasn't as intimidating as Bai Xiaochun had imagined, and after a moment, seemed like nothing more than an old man. In fact, after he smiled, that divine sensation on him faded away. Obviously, he was very different from the giant Ghost King, which actually got Bai Xiaochun more nervous as he scrambled to decide how to act. As he walked into the hall, the huge dragon watched him go, then slowly disappeared up into the clouds. As Bai Xiaochun walked further into the hall, his anxiety mounted. He really wasn't sure how to act, but was ready to play it by ear and adjust at a moment's notice. The Grand Heaven Master didn't seem to care about how nervous Bai Xiaochun was. After looking him up and down, he said, I asked you here so that I could ask you a question. Do you or do you not dare to investigate all the important people in the dynasty, and find out which of them have interrupted the peaceful cultivation being practiced by the Arch-Emperor? Although he spoke the words slowly, they caused a strange energy and pressure to build up in the entire hall. Bai Xiaochun blinked a few times, already starting to get excited by what he was hearing. Considering that he wanted revenge, the chance to investigate all of the important people in the imperial court was the perfect chance. If he said they were loyal to the Arch-Emperor, then that meant they were, whether they actually were or not. Expression brightening, he slapped his chest and passionately declared, Grand Heaven Master, there's no need to ask whether I dare or not. As long as you give the order, I will dare to do anything. Investigate the aristocracy? I'll even investigate the Arch-Emperor. A strange, amused expression could be seen on the Grand Heaven Master as he asked, Aren't you afraid of the Arch-Emperor? Bai Xiaochun hesitated for a moment before cautiously asking, Well, what cultivation base does he have? The Arch-Emperor is a diva. After breathing a sigh of relief, Bai Xiaochun thumped his chest and decided he should probably use the same technique he had used to feel out the giant Ghost King. He didn't care about the Arch-Emperor, or a bunch of ministers and the aristocracy. After all, he had already offended just about everybody. In terms of what would happen long run, he wasn't too worried about it. As long as he could get his cultivation base high enough, then he would surely be able to find a way to escape the wildlands and get back to the Great Wall and the Heavenspan River. Having reached this point in his train of thought, he felt not only a bit calmer, but also realized he was coming to like this Grand Heaven Master more and more. With a mission like this, and a title like Inspections Commissioner, he would obviously have a lot of power. Getting more and more excited, and convinced more than ever that this Grand Heaven Master was definitely a rare individual, he decided that he should probably take advantage of the situation to do a bit of brown-nosing. Grand Heaven Master, you have shown me a mountain of kindness, and in fact, I owe you my life. Without you, I would very likely be buried in the depths of the Yellow Springs right now. A trifling diva might be able to crush me to death, but how could I ever bow my head to evil forces? Besides, Grand Heaven Master, there's no way that you would just sit around watching a loyal and devoted youngster like myself be bullied. Am I right? A strange expression could be seen on the Grand Heaven Master's face. He had heard that Bai Hao was like this in Giant Ghost City, but now that he saw his behavior with his own eyes, he realized the rumors were not accurate. Bai Hao wasn't just a flatterer, he took advantage of every single opportunity to be a sycophant. In any case, the Grand Heaven Master was pleased by the answer he had been given. With that, he gave an enigmatic smile, looking at Bai Xiaochun as though he could read his heart. Go, you will be taken to the inspections manor. That will be your new place of residence. With that, he waved his sleeve, and Bai Xiaochun's vision blurred. When it cleared, he was outside of the imperial palace, standing right in front of the black-robed man from earlier. The man didn't seem surprised at all by Bai Xiaochun's sudden appearance, and simply turned and walked off without saying a word. Bai Xiaochun was stunned that the mere wave of a sleeve by the Grand Heaven Master could move him to a completely different location. Furthermore, Bai Xiaochun had prepared a whole slew of other things to say, but hadn't been given the chance. I guess it doesn't matter. I'll just save them for next time. If I used up all my flattery in one shot, then what would I do afterward? Fully convinced that this was the right way to look at things, Bai Xiaochun stuck his chin up and swaggered after the black-robed man. Meanwhile, back in Heaven Master Hall in the Imperial Palace, the Grand Heaven Master was looking toward a location further in the depths of the palace, a profound gleam in his eyes. The blood of the first-generation Arch-Emperor runs in your veins, but why are you causing a stir now? Do you really want to bathe Arch-Emperor City in blood again? The Grand Heaven Master shook his head, and then closed his eyes to meditate. The inspections manor was not in the Imperial City up above, but rather, down below in one of the boroughs in the central district of the city. More specifically, it was located in Borough 4. The black-robed man led Bai Xiaochun out of that city in the clouds, and down to an awe-inspiring manor complex. The manor was large, and placed in a rather inconvenient location in the middle of the borough. However, the streets around it were all empty. People were apparently so terrified of it that they would take long detours just to avoid getting close to it. It was pitch black, and radiated a cold, sinister aura that made it seem like some ferocious, primordial beast. As soon as Bai Xiaochun saw it, he gasped in shock. Obviously, this was a very sinister and deathly place. Slaughters of all sorts had taken place here, leaving the air itself stained with a gloomy and eerie feeling that would never be dispelled. From the outside, it looked very similar to how a governmental office in the mortal world would look, and yet, in some ways it was different. Two huge statues could be seen on either side of the main entrance, clad in suits of black armor. Powerful fluctuations rolled off of them, and although they were clearly statues, they seemed like they could leap into action at any moment to defend the manor. In fact, their eyes actually came to focus on the black-robed man for just a moment before returning to their original position. That in itself gave Bai Xiaochun a better understanding of what the inspections manor was like. Although he couldn't tell much about those two statues, he could tell from their fluctuations that they were as powerful as devas. Diva-level statues, he thought, swallowing hard. If the black-robed man weren't here, he would have been hard-pressed not to go over and touch the statues to see what they felt like. The main gate to the inspections manor was also pitch black, and as soon as it opened, it was possible to see that the interior had limestone pathways and countless other buildings and structures inside. However, not a single person was present. Even after the black-robed man led Bai Xiaochun inside, not even the tiniest sound could be heard. Bai Xiaochun looked around, and for some reason felt a bit terrified at how quiet everything was. It was just too quiet. The black-robed man looked around with a glint of reminiscence in his eyes, and then tossed a black command medallion to Bai Xiaochun. This is the inspections manor. You're on your own now, Bai Hao. Bai Xiaochun caught the medallion and was about to ask some questions, when the black-robed man turned and vanished. Bai Xiaochun was now alone. Looking around at his surroundings, and then at the command medallion, he shook his head. That's it? Bai Xiaochun was not very pleased. Considering how high his status was, the fact that the black-robed man had treated him in such a way seemed very negligent. However, considering that he was obviously close to the Grand Heaven Master, Bai Xiaochun simply sighed. Whatever. For the sake of the Grand Heaven Master, I'll let this slide. Fingering the command medallion, he sent some divine sense out to check his surroundings. However, he quickly came to realize that there was an intense pressure in the area that limited his divine sense to roughly 10% of its normal capacity. What kind of a weird place is this inspections manor? He thought nervously. With that, he sent some divine sense into the command medallion, only to find that he needed to spend time activating it before he could use it. Considering the level of his cultivation base, and the current speed of the process, it seemed like it would take at least 20 hours before the activation process was complete. With that, Bai Xiaochun looked around hesitantly, and then asked, "Anybody there? Hey, is anybody there?" He continued to shout in such a manner as he walked further into the manor. However, no matter how he shouted, not a single person appeared. Not only was Bai Xiaochun surprised by this, he was also starting to feel that something was off. This place can't really be completely empty, can it? He sent some divine sense out, and began to hurry along a bit faster. After all, evening was about to fall. Before long, he had taken a look at most of the areas in the inspections manor. He had peered into all of the grand halls, and all of the residences. However, no matter where he went, he didn't see a sign of a single other person. By this time, he was really getting jittery at how strange this place was. There's no way that I, the inspections commissioner, am the only person inside of the inspections manor. His intuition was indeed telling him that there were other auras present. It was just that he couldn't find them, as if they existed somewhere between life and death. Don't tell me this place is haunted. Shivering, he suddenly thought back to the Arch-Emperor's sepulchre, and the spine-tingling things that had occurred there. Spinning, he looked over his shoulder, but there was nobody behind him, not even any paper people. It was starting to get dark, causing shadows to fill the manor and making it even more sinister. Flustered, he decided that he needed to leave, but quickly discovered that he couldn't. The entire manor was completely sealed and locked down by some sort of restrictive spell. By now, he was truly terrified, and was convinced that there was something very wrong with this inspections manor. After confirming that it was impossible to get out, he found a random building and pushed open the door. Seeing that there was no dust anywhere, he nervously sat down cross-legged. I guess I'll have to wait until the command medallion is completely activated before I can learn the secrets of the inspections manor. Looking down, he confirmed that the command medallion was roughly 30% activated. Gritting his teeth, he rotated his cultivation base to try to get the process to go faster. Come on, hurry up. I have a really bad feeling about this. It's almost night. I'm worried that this place is haunted. Shivering, he cursed the black-robed man a bit, then thought about the crappy command medallion. Activating it shouldn't be that hard, right? There had to be a way to get the blasted thing to activate faster. It was dark outside as Bai Xiaochun frantically tried to activate the command medallion. It was so deathly quiet around him that it would have been possible to hear a pin drop. Slowly but surely, his hair began to stand on end. He simply couldn't remain calm, and was doing everything he could to activate the command medallion as quickly as possible. However, at some point during the night, his work was interrupted by the sound of footsteps coming from outside the building he was in. Thump thump, thump thump. It almost sounded like a beating heart, although Bai Xiaochun was quite certain they were footsteps. However, after sending some divine sense outside to check, he couldn't see anyone in the area. That, of course, caused his scalp to tingle so hard it felt like it might explode. It's really, really haunted. He felt like crying. Other than death, the thing he feared most in life was ghosts. It didn't matter that he was in the heaven-down nascent soul stage, he still couldn't shake that deep-seated phobia. Without any hesitation, he procured a big stack of paper talismans from his bag of holding and began to slap them down all over himself. They were leftover talismans from his days back in the river-defying sect, which he had also used in the Arch-Emperor's labyrinth. At the moment, he didn't care at all that using them could theoretically reveal his identity, and he even forgot to use the powers of his mask to change their appearance. After plastering himself all over with them, he was still shaking in fear, and kept pushing the command medallion to activate. At the same time, he kept looking around anxiously, worried he would see a face looming in the darkness. I'm the inspections commissioner, and this is the inspections manor. How could this be happening? It shouldn't be like this. As he sat there nervously, he suddenly realized that he could hear more and more footsteps outside, until it sounded like an entire army was passing by. By this point, he was virtually going crazy. So many ghosts, he thought, his face white as a sheet. It was at this point that, without any warning, someone suddenly knocked on the door. It was a rigorous, methodical knock that frightened Bai Xiaochun so badly he leapt to his feet and stared at the door, panting and trembling. After a moment, the knocking stopped, and then the footsteps went off into the distance, as though whatever army was outside had moved on. Eventually, when Bai Xiaochun was sure that everything was quiet, he wiped the sweat from his brow. All of a sudden, he felt a bit embarrassed. After all, he was a powerful cultivator, a wildlands necromancer who used countless vengeful souls to conjure magical flames. And yet, here he was being bullied by ghosts. All in all, he couldn't help but feel a bit scornful of his own actions. Come on, is Lord Bai really afraid of ghosts? Nah, I just don't want to go out until I'm finished activating the command medallion. After all, I wouldn't want to cause any misunderstandings. Having reached the conclusion that this was definitely the best way to look at it, he no longer felt very embarrassed, and was just about to continue working with the command medallion when, all of a sudden, a rumbling sound echoed out as some massive force pushed against the door, causing it to swing open. As it did, a chill wind rushed inside, startling Bai Xiaochun so much that he screamed and unleashed all the power of his cultivation base. Lunging backward, he shouted, I'm the inspections commissioner. We're all on the same team here. It was impossible to say whether or not it was because of what Bai Xiaochun had just shouted, but after the door opened, it was obvious that there wasn't anyone standing in the doorway. It was completely empty. Sweat poured down Bai Xiaochun's forehead, and his aura trembled unstably. Outside, Arch-Emperor City seemed completely dark, which wasn't how Bai Xiaochun remembered the place usually being at night. Back in Burrow 89, it had always been a lively place. Furthermore, he was now in the central district of the city, in Burrow 4, a place which should have been even more bustling. In the center of the city, the streets were packed day and night. But strangely, Even with the door open, Bai Xiaochun couldn't hear even a whisper of the hustle and bustle that he should have. Everything was dark and quiet. Apparently, this part of the city center was aware of how things worked near the inspection's manor and turned off all of their lights at night. What the hell kind of place is this? Teeth chattering, he performed an incantation gesture with his right hand and then waved his finger, causing the door to swing closed. Looking around the area vigilantly, he scanned everything with divine sense, but again came up with nothing. Finally, he patted his bag of holding to produce a soul-hoarding pagoda, out of which Bai Hao flew. "You're a ghost cultivator, my apprentice," he said. "Help me look around and see if there are any other beings like you around here." Bai Hao was a bit taken aback, but he looked around for a moment, then closed his eyes for a while. Eventually, he frowned. "Master," he said hesitantly, "there are definitely no ghosts around here that have mental faculties like I do. However, there's definitely something strange about this place, as if it exists somewhere between the realms of death and life. I really can't put my finger on it. It's like this place." At this point he realized that his master's face had turned deathly white, and that he appeared to be completely terrified. "What's wrong, master?" he asked. Bai Xiaochun licked his lips and mused that he definitely couldn't allow himself to look scared in front of his apprentice. Thumping himself on his chest, he said, "Ha ha ha. Nothing. I'm not scared at all, go on with your explanation." Master. I never said you looked scared, huh? Oh, ha ha ha. Well, let's not talk about that. You were just saying something but didn't finish. What about this place?" Looking oddly at Bai Xiaochun, Bai Hao continued, "To me, this place doesn't feel like it's empty at all. In fact, it's like there are people all around us, hidden figures in large numbers." His words caused goosebumps to cover Bai Xiaochun's skin, and he looked around left and right to see if he could see anything. He couldn't. "Master, are you sure you're not scared?" All of a sudden, Bai Hao found the situation somewhat funny. This was his first time seeing his master looking scared like this. He hadn't even been afraid when going up against hundreds of chosen. Inside, Bai Xiaochun was wailing in fear. However, on the outside, he simply glared at Bai Hao. "Nonsense," he said loudly. "Me? Scared? I'm not scared of anything." After that, he decided to change the topic again. Pulling Bai Hao a bit closer, he continued to work with the command medallion and simultaneously began to chat randomly with Bai Hao. "So, my apprentice, how have you been doing lately? Oh, how is the 18-colored flame coming along? We won't be going back to our shop, you know, so we need to think of a new way to get our hands on some more souls." Bai Xiaochun chattered on, changing the conversation topic constantly. Although an odd expression could be seen on Bai Hao's face, he continued to answer the questions. As the two chatted, time passed, and eventually Bai Xiaochun started to run out of things to talk about. That was when he related to Bai Hao what had occurred during his meeting with the Grand Heaven Master. Earlier, Bai Hao hadn't dared to let even the slightest fluctuation out, for fear that he be detected. Therefore, he wasn't privy to what had gone on between Bai Xiaochun and the Grand Heaven Master. As Bai Hao listened, his expression turned very somber. "Investigate who is loyal to the Arch-Emperor." Bai Hao was shocked, and at the same time, realized that his master had been dragged into an enormous web of intrigue. Eyes flickering with intelligence, he provided his analysis of the situation. "Master, this is no small matter. Not only did the Grand Heaven Master defy the wishes of the majority by not killing us, but he then went on to appoint you as the inspections commissioner. Obviously, he's using the fact that you offended so many people to use you as a tool." "I thought of that too," Bai Xiaochun said, his eyebrows dancing up and down. "Master is just too outstanding, don't you say?" Although Bai Xiaochun had temporarily stopped thinking about what an eerie place he was in, he didn't stop using the powers of the mask to conceal himself. As for Bai Hao, he continued to ponder the matter, using his superior intellect to analyze how the situation would be most beneficial for his master. "Master, this situation might be a good opportunity for us. All of it will come down to the Grand Heaven Master's stance. He obviously took a liking to you because of how you offended everyone. In that case, he probably wants to use you, not just like an ordinary tool, but like a sharp knife. Master, from here on out, the more people you offend, the safer we'll be." Bai Xiaochun had long since become convinced that Bai Hao was extremely intelligent, most especially because of the incident with Sun Yifan and Sima Dao. Therefore, after hearing his analysis, he nodded in agreement. Bai Hao was very pleased to have the approval of his master. Eyes flickering with strange light, he continued to think about the matter for a moment. Then he leaned closer to Bai Xiaochun, lowered his voice, and said, "Master, I think I have an idea of what the Grand Heaven Master is thinking. First you need to smooth out the internal crises. After that, you need to weaken the aristocracy. In terms of smoothing out the internal crises, I don't have any plan for how to do that. But as far as weakening the aristocracy, when the time comes, I have a plan that will completely crush the influential clans and other powers, and at the same time, make you more valuable than ever to the Grand Heaven Master. With that, he went on to elaborate his plan. So ruthless, Bai Xiaochun murmured, his eyes widening. Master, Bai Hao replied quietly, since we've started down this path, we need to walk it to the end. Bai Hao's plan was so ruthless that Bai Xiaochun was already hesitant to pull it off. However, if he ended up in the right circumstances, it might work. Right now, though, things were too unstable. We'll talk about that more later. Right now, the most important thing is for me to do a good job at being the inspections commissioner. Looking even more serious, Bai Hao said, Master, we also need to start making some secret plans to make sure that we don't get disposed of once our usefulness has passed. Don't worry, Bai Xiaochun said. Your master has a lot of experience with that kind of thing. Then he laughed heartily. If he hadn't said that, Bai Hao would have felt a lot better, but now, he had a very ill premonition. Whenever his master felt this confident, bad things always happened. However, he still couldn't come up with any way to remedy that situation other than to continue to offer advice to Bai Xiaochun. And thus the night passed without anything strange happening. Bai Xiaochun continued to focus on activating the command medallion and chatting with Bai Hao. At dawn, he went outside and confirmed that the restrictive spell was still in place, and that he couldn't leave the inspections manor. The only way to do so would be to completely activate the command medallion. He kept working, and before long, evening fell again, which was when he finally activated the medallion. It had taken 26 hours, which was longer than he had originally anticipated. As soon as the medallion was activated, he sent some divine sense into it, whereupon a sound like heavenly thunder filled his mind. Then, his divine sense merged with the medallion, and he saw a complete image of the inspections manor. At that point, his eyes went wide, and his entire body thrummed with joy. Despite exerting all of the willpower possible, he couldn't hold back from gasping and then releasing a shout of surprise. What he could see in his mind's eye was a miniature version of the entire inspections manor. And from this vantage point, it was possible to see that the entire place was filled with numerous coffins. In fact, the manor seemed to be built on top of a huge collection of the things. There were fully 100,000 of them, densely packed together into roughly 9 levels. Each one of those coffins emanated terrifying fluctuations. The deeper the levels got, the fewer coffins they had, and yet the more terrifying the fluctuations. Bai Xiaochun's shock mounted as he studied the situation. The 9th level only had a single coffin, but by means of the command medallion, Bai Xiaochun could tell that it had the aura of a demigod. Heavens! Bai Xiaochun murmured, chest heaving as he realized that he must be holding, not just a command medallion, but rather, a magical device that could be used to control these 100,000 coffins. He actually felt as if he could use a single thought to cause all 100,000 coffins to open up, and then do the same to the eyes of all the corpses that lay therein. So, that's the true inspections manor. Bai Xiaochun thought, stunned. After a long moment, he retracted his divine sense and looked down at the black command medallion. By now, he was convinced that what he held was not the Master Command Medallion. There was no way the Grand Heaven Master would simply hand over such heaven-shaking, earth-shattering power. This must be an auxiliary medallion. The Master Medallion is surely in the hands of the Grand Heaven Master. He is the one who can command the army beneath the inspections manor to do anything he wishes. However, that doesn't really affect me. I'm on the Grand Heaven Master's team, after all. Even using a bit of this power is good enough. After getting his breathing under control, he sent some divine sense into the command medallion and focused it on the subterranean coffin nearest him. Awaken! As soon as the thought rippled out, the limestone slab nearest the door of the building he was in shattered, and an ancient coffin shot up into the air. It was made of black iron, and as soon as it thudded down onto the ground, the lid was pushed open from within. An aura of death and rot erupted out, along with a burly man clad in black armor, wearing a black mask, and pulsing with a murderous aura. Based on the intensity of the murderous aura, he had killed too many people to count. It immediately caused Bai Xiaochun's expression to flicker with shock. As the man slowly looked up, glowing red eyes could be seen behind the mask. He took a step forward toward Bai Xiaochun, the fluctuations of the great circle of the nascent soul stage rolling off of him. The black-armored corpse trooper walked up to Bai Xiaochun, then bowed his head and knelt on one knee. "Greetings, exalted one," he said in a rumbling voice that contained respect and veneration. Bai Xiaochun's eyes sparkled, and Bai Hao's jaw dropped. So, this is the true power hidden within the inspection's manner. Bai Xiaochun poured some more divine sense into the command medallion, and then called out to another of the coffins to awaken. Before long, the entire inspection's manor was rumbling as one coffin after another opened up, and more black-armored men flew out. Soon, there were fully 1,000. The weakest among them were equivalent to the mid-nascent soul stage, and a few were at the level of half-devas. The murderous aura they emitted affected the wind and clouds, and they were surrounded by the perpetual wailing of ghosts and wolves. And that was just a small portion of the force hidden beneath the inspection's manor. Bai Xiaochun wanted to call upon more, but knew that his command medallion was limited in usage, and could only be used to summon 1,000. Furthermore, he could only call on the coffins in the top 7 levels. The 8th level only had 10 coffins, all of which had diva-level power. Of course, none of them contained souls, it was only fleshly body power. 1,000 is good enough. Bai Xiaochun was by no means disappointed. In fact, he was elated. After looking over the 1,000 black-armored corpse troopers, he threw his head back and laughed heartily. All of a sudden, he felt like he was back on the Great Wall, where the wave of a finger could send an army of thousands into battle. If I was in this position back when everyone was coming to cause trouble for me, I wouldn't have had to do anything. I could have just waved my hand, and all of those chosen would have been crushed. Bai Xiaochun was feeling very happy and very confident. Also, he was coming to the conclusion that this Grand Heaven Master was much more reliable than the Giant Ghost King. After all, the rewards the Giant Ghost King gave him were all honorary, whereas the Grand Heaven Master had given him command of an army. There was another function to the command medallion other than being able to summon the army of 1,000 troops. It was also filled with reports about all of the aristocracy within the wildlands, and especially Archemperor City. It was as if hidden eyes were watching everyone at every moment, reporting back all of the events which occurred in their lives, and then storing it in this command medallion. Whoever possessed this command medallion would be privy to countless secrets. Shocked, Bai Xiaochun immediately began to browse through some of the reports, and soon realized that the reason he had been attacked by the hundreds of chosen was that someone had been propagating false rumors. Those rumors had aroused such anger among the masses that eventually, the chosen decided to simply attack him directly. In terms of the culprits, Zhou Hong was only one of many. Virtually all of the people Bai Xiaochun had captured in the necromancer kettle had played a part. However, there were clues pointing to the people who had truly instigated the matter, 2 of the imperial princes. Bai Xiaochun's anger was beginning to grow. Everything was now starting to become clear. And that was especially true regarding the young man with the feng shui compass who had accompanied Zhou Hong that day. A quick bit of investigating using the command medallion quickly identified him. He was none other than a vassal of the Grand Prince. Complete and utter bullying, Bai Xiaochun said through gritted teeth. With that, he pondered the mission the Grand Heaven Master had given him, and then thought about how all of these aristocrats and nobles had sought to kill him, and his eyes began to shine with cold light. When Bai Hao realized that his master was getting angry, he asked what the problem was. Upon hearing the explanation, he quickly advised, "Master, just keep your cool for a bit. If your personal matters cause problems for the Grand Heaven Master's main plan, it could." "There's no need to keep my cool," Bai Xiaochun interrupted with the wave of a hand. "The two issues are one and the same. After all, the Grand Heaven Master doesn't know who is truly loyal to the Archemperor, and he didn't prohibit me from investigating anyone." He was now in a position of power, backed by the Grand Heaven Master, and sure that his poor little life would not be in danger. Considering what type of person he was, there was no way that he wouldn't seek his revenge. Of course, Bai Xiaochun also knew that, even with the dharmic decree of the Grand Heaven Master to back him, and the level of power he wielded, he still had to have evidence on his side if he wanted to act. That way, he wouldn't stir up any unnecessary trouble. Evidence like that might be difficult to gather for an ordinary person, but not for Bai Xiaochun. Back when he had been an inquisitor in Devil Penitentiary, he had acquired all sorts of secrets during the interrogations he performed. "Let's go," Bai Xiaochun said proudly. "We're paying a little visit to the prison." With that, he and Bai Hao flew up into the air, followed by 1,000 burly men in black armor. It was evening, but Archemperor City in general was still quite alive, so when Bai Xiaochun appeared on the streets with his army of black-armored corpse troopers, looking very grand and magnificent, he attracted instant attention. After all, the corpse troopers radiated murderous auras filled with death, and were sinister to behold. Who are those people? Look at that incredible murderous aura. Hey, isn't that Bai Hao? How come all of those black-armored soul cultivators behind him seem so rife with death? Conversations rippled out in all directions. Bai Xiaochun was very pleased at being the center of attention like this. With 1,000 troops at his command, who would ever dare to provoke him? Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.